Well, it is my pleasure to rise and again raise, along with my coalition Senate colleagues, profound and serious concerns about this rogue union. Because, of course, what this bill tells us is that Labor has gone into panic mode after failing to do anything about the bullying, the intimidation, the lawlessness, the standover tactics, the illegal payments, the corruption and all the other heinous conduct courtesy of the CFMEU. And it has to be said again, as Senator McCash said so strongly in her media statement, the Albanese government is not telling the truth when it says that its CFMEU legislation will clean up the scandal-plagued construction sector. The government's bill is weak. The government's bill does not do the job. That's right. The CFMEU should be deregistered, like the late Bob Hawke had the courage to do when he led the deregistration of the BLF. And even only a number of years before he died, he called out Labor for failing to take the strongest stand against the CFMEU. And what perhaps people don't understand about the CFMEU, and particularly in the Senate, is that every Labor senator who comes into this place comes as a representative of their union. And there are a number of representatives on the left of the CFMEU. And in fact, I am still waiting for answers from the member for Corangamite following a release that I issued on the 10th of July 2020 after it emerged that the CFMEU, which had backed Ms Coker in her campaigns, was demanding that Ms Coker repay hundreds of thousands of dollars in industrial left union donations. And I'll take the interjection. This is not a laughing matter. So whatever deal has been done between the CFMEU and the member for Corangamite, and I was at the other end of that campaign, from the bullies and the aggressors standing on polling booths dealing with the thugs from the CFMEU. And for those of us who've had to face this in a marginal seat campaign, it is a disgrace. And I will also call out the former member for Corangamite, Darren Cheeseman, who has now been forced to leave the Labor Party because of his conduct, including serious allegations of sexual harassment. We don't know all the details, but he was also backed by the CFMEU. What's that got to do with the bill? What's that got to do with the bill? Wow. Senator Caccione, I'll tell you what's got to do with the bill. The CFMEU has backed certain members that are still in this parliament through their thuggery, through their lawlessness.
Senator Henderson, take your seat, please. Senator Henderson, take your seat. So I have to remind the chamber that interjections are disorderly. Please have respect for the senator who has the call. There's plenty of time for you to make your contributions during adjournments. Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Acting Deputy President. So I continue to remind those opposite, what has this got to do with members of parliament? Because the CFMEU has for a very long period of time backed their union representatives who end up in the parliament. And as I said in July 2020, revelations in today's media name the CFMMEU's John Setka as one of the union bosses pursuing payment. It is alleged that hundreds of thousands of dollars are involved. It's also reported that the CFMEU provided close to 100 volunteers to Ms Coker and also to the Labor MP Ms Carney. And so as I do right now and as I did back then, the member for Corangamite needs to reveal whether these union election donations were properly recorded and declared as required by the Australian Electoral Commission, and the member for Corangamite needs to come clean with what happened. She reportedly defected to the Victorian Labor's extreme socialist left faction. Now then, I think she went to another faction. Who would know? There's just so many shabby factional deals, but the people of Corangamite deserve these answers. Did she repay this money? Why was this demand made? Was this money properly declared? And why are members, like the member for Corangamite, embroiled in these dirty deals with this union, when we have known for years that they have been up to their neck in unlawful behaviour, in bullying and intimidation? It is an absolute and utter disgrace. So I say to the member for Corangamite, it is time that your constituents knew what went on. What deal was done with John Setka? I say to the member for Corangamite. Why was she required to repay money, which apparently was reportedly hundreds of thousands of dollars? What money was given in the first place, and what was the agreement? Because, frankly, Australians have had enough, and it is no wonder that we have such a disaster in Victoria, in our economy, under the reckless state Labor government, after years of doing shonky deals with this union, which has driven up construction costs in Victoria by some 30%. So I say to the minister responsible, who's sitting opposite in this chamber, if the Albanese government is serious about taking on the CFMEU, then this legislation must have teeth. You know, get a bit of Bob Hawke, invoke his spirit, his guts, his courage, because we're not seeing it from this Prime Minister and from this government. So we are going to be pursuing a number of amendments. The administration must apply to all branches of the CFMEU for a minimum of 3 years. The minister should not have the ability to end the administration early. The scheme of administration can only be varied by the federal court on the application of the administrator. The legislation must clearly set out what must be in the scheme of administration. This should not be determined solely at the whim of the minister. That political donations, political campaigns and advertising by the CFMEU should be explicitly banned during the period of administration. And frankly, if the Prime Minister had any moral courage, he would repay the $4 million that he has received in CFMEU donations since he became the Prime Minister. $6.2 million in total, and $4 grubby million from this union since Labor was elected. We also want to see greater transparency. The administrator must provide a written report to Parliament every 3 months after the commencement of the administration about its activities and progress, and appear at Senate estimates. The administrator must also be given the ability to impose longer expulsion or disqualification periods for officers. There must be a new fit and proper person test. There must be the ability for a special purpose auditor to examine the financial dealings of the CFMEU. The special purpose auditor's first report needs to be tabled by the final sitting day of 2024. If these and other amendments are not agreed by the government, we know that this government is only giving the CFMEU a slap across the back of the hand with a wet lettuce. And I also invoke Paul Keating in that reference. Because one thing that I will say about both Bob Hawke and Paul Keating, they had the courage of their convictions when it came to driving certain reforms. This would never have been tolerated if Bob Hawke was the Prime Minister. But we have a weak and unprincipled government running this country, led by a weak and unprincipled Prime Minister, the most left-leaning Prime Minister in living memory. And it's about time. It's about time that this government took its job and its duty to the Australian people seriously. So this is, again, a mess of Labor's own making. This came about. The government let the CFMEU and the crooks and the spivs and the bullies and the members of outlaw motorcycle gangs off the hook when it abolished the Australian Building and Construction Commission and gave control of the construction sector in Australia to their mates in the CFMEU. As a result of Mr Albanese's decision to abolish the ABCC, we have seen a skyrocketing of criminal activity, threats, corruption, bribery, intimidation, violence, bullying, standover tactics, misappropriation of funds and other accusations of lawlessness by the CFMEU in the construction sector. And I hear the chuckle from a member of the Greens, and I'm reminded that when we stood with Senator Lambie to take the strongest of stand in defence of women and the way they were treated by the CFMEU, the Greens voted against Senator Lambie's private senator's bill. The Greens did not have the courage of their convictions to stand up to John Setka and the thuggery, and particularly, as Senator Lambie was focusing on, the appalling treatment of some women by this union. So, as I say, we have a number of very serious concerns about this bill. This bill provides far too much discretion to the minister, and in fact, under the current provisions of the bill, he could remove the CFMEU out of administration tomorrow, figuratively speaking, if he wished. So, if this legislation is going to be supported by the coalition, we need to make sure that it has teeth, that it makes a difference, that there is proper accountability, and that Australians' trust, frankly, in the government can somehow even perhaps be restored to some degree. I don't really know how, because of the way in which Labor members and senators and candidates have covered up this disgraceful conduct over so many years. I mean, time and time again, Madam Acting Deputy President, we raised serious concerns about multiple breaches of the law, multiple findings that the law had been breached, very serious penalties issued against the CFMEU and many of its members. And it is really quite disgusting that it took the work of a media organisation, the very fine work of Nick McKenzie and other journalists, to wake up this government, because it didn't seem to matter. The rap sheet of offences, the rap sheet of intimidation, the bullying, the shocking stuff that was going on construction sites, none of that seemed to resonate because, I mean, even Senator Wong, of course, used to work for the CFMEU. Now, you know, I have not heard her get up and call out the CFMEU's conduct that she obviously would have seen when she was working for them. I'm sure it was not all squeaky clean when Senator Wong was working for the CFMEU. She was an industrial officer for the CFMEU, and, you know, there are times in public life when you've got to do the right thing and stand up to what is right and stand up against what is wrong. So this is a huge warning to the government. You take corruption, you take bribery, you start taking these shocking incidents of lawlessness seriously. Don't just paper over the cracks, because that's what this bill currently does. You need to give this bill teeth. You need to support all of our amendments, and only then would we agree to pass this bill.